This is update for August 31, 2023, day 554 of the war, and of the date update. Also catch up for August 30th. So I'm going to start with developments in Africa, and this is part of the sort of general overview, and then I'm going to switch to situation in Ukraine. So there's another country that fell, which is Gabon, which is here near Equatorial Guinea, and obviously, as you can imagine, this is, I cannot directly point to Wagner Group, but it's very clear that that's another country that's living French sphere of influence, similar to Niger and the rest of the countries in that region, and Central African Republic and so on. So you can kind of just infer from that this is probably was done by intelligence agencies or call it mercenaries or so on. So this is obviously not a random event. At the same time, I would like to highlight that all of these countries, they have internal problems, and basically all of these presidents and heads of these countries were essentially corrupt. So without that internal weakness and rot, nothing of this would have been possible. All of these actions by and I cannot directly pinpoint towards Russia, but it's sort of, how to say, all indirect evidence points in that direction in case of Gabon. But in case of Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Central Africa, it's sort of firm, let's put it this way. But again, what Russia is doing is capitalizing on internal problems and corruption that effectively, when these countries were in sphere influence of France, it was neglected. It was kind of like, I'll call it in quotes, allowed. And so this is what Russia is taking advantage of. And that obviously, majority of the population is basically poor because of that, and they fed up with the current government and they don't care. And that's just what's really happening in all of these countries. In terms of Gabon, there is not really much there in terms of resources. So this is more like another flag on the map, because it does produce some crude oil, but it was going down quite a bit, and basically it looks like the reserves are depleted, and there is no exploration of new reserves. So basically, there is not much there. There is a significant deposits of manganese. I don't know. Maybe there are other natural resources that sort of potentially available, but at the current stage, there is, as I said, not terribly much. Also, want to highlight that Guinea is sort of another potential domino to fall in this whole, call it, system. And then situation in Niger, it looks like the French ambassador has lost its immunity and will be arrested and expelled from the country in a short order. So it looks like things are sort of progressing towards escalation in Niger. It remains to be seen if France wants to directly invade the country, because that's really what's left. It's very clear that these ECOWAS countries, they have no desire and no ability to do so. So the only way is for France, and as I said, logistically, it's going to be somewhat painful because Algeria is blocking access through air to Niger. And similar situation probably in Libya, so you have to go through Morocco. Essentially, Mali is also out of, so it's becoming quite a bit of nightmare logistically. Now let's switch to the economic situation around the world, and it's not pretty. We are sort of at the very beginning stages of sort of sinking into the, at least for sure, recession, potential depression. But I want to highlight one clear point, and I just want to make it very clear: this is going to be stagflationary situation where inflation will be high, and at the same time real economic output will be going down, unemployment is going to be high. So it's going to be just let's say ugly picture of more of 70s and 60s, as opposed to the time of Great Depression, where it was more deflationary. So this is, and I think the market is really still not getting that. They still think about this deflationary depression or recession, and it's actually going to be stagflationary. Either recession and depression really depends on the economic policy. If politicians are going to put the pedal to the ground, then they will drive it into the depression. And I'll show what's going on in Germany, and it's in particular ugly picture there. But let's just quickly look at Italy and France. So the key that is very clear, becoming clear and very clear trend everywhere in developed world is that unemployment started to rise. So there was a strong employment situation, and things are changing. We're at the very, very, very early stages of that, but the trend, it appears to have changed. At the same time, inflation, like headline, does go down, even in Italy, as you can see, quite significantly. And France still managed to show positive GDP growth, but probably not for long. But let's look at the US, where it's a basic linchpin of the overall situation in the world. And here it's very clear that the job market is going softer. So the job openings, this is not the best indicator, but still kind of like lack of anything good makes this one kind of acceptable. So as you can see, it's from roughly, call it 9.2 to 8.8 job openings. A lot of these job openings are really trashy and nobody would ever take them. It's very poor sort of statistical quality and so on. As I said, this is not the indicator that sort of you would totally rely on, but it's just one of many, and it points in a negative direction. Then this one is more sort of relevant. Challenger job cuts. Basically, it's a job cut announcement, and you can see it really spiked in August. It actually kind of went down in July, and sort of again, as I said, this is probably sign of the renewed weakness in the job market in the U.S. Continuing jobless claims, they are, but they're not really hugely up. So it's people who are staying unemployed, and what this really means is that the people who got laid off, they have hard time finding new jobs for themselves. And then the most key part here is this core PCE for July, which you can see it actually went up. The market really didn't read it this way, that this is extremely important. This is probably one of the most important indicators. This is what the US central bank is looking at when they make decision about their interest rates. At the minimum, it shows very clearly that the interest rates are not going down. They may may not increase in September one more time. But overall, the fight with inflation in the US is a struggle. It's a problem. And a similar problem is actually in the European Union. And as I said before, this is a result of the policies, economic policies, energy policies that were enacted in the Western world. By the way, related to this inflation is also a problem with home prices. They continue rising in the US, which will help inflation. So this is all interconnected system. Even though the home prices for 20 largest metropolitan areas in the US, looks like they went down by 1.2%, but overall for the country, it's 3.1. So again, this definitely doesn't helps inflation in the long run. And then, initial jobless claim didn't look that ugly. Actually, a little bit went down. So again, the job market in US is still okay, but there, as I said, similar to what I said about Italy, and this is relevant for every other place, we are in the very, very early stages of rising unemployment across the board in the developed world, in West, and also China, the same boat, by the way. Well, Russia is probably going to be exception just because when you mobilize a lot of people, you simply burn them in the war, kill them. So you kind of like naturally sort of reducing supply of the labor there. Let's actually look at China. So there's looks like there's a little bit of bounce in manufacturing in China. As you can see, manufacturing PMI went a little bit up. This is S&P. This is basically one company that does it. Then there's another one, Chinese one, Caixin. So this one is actually showing that manufacturing flipping into positive. As you can see, it's about 50, which is means expansion. So we'll see if that's with the data that will come out, if there is some kind of turnaround in China, or this is just a temporary blip. But so far, it's unclear picture. Let's put it this way. The non-manufacturing, though, is clearly pointing in a negative direction. As you can see, it's going down. I actually want to highlight Germany because this is really things there really starting to look ugly. First of all, inflation is not going away anywhere, as you can see, despite the increases in interest rate by European Central Bank. Retail sales are really going down, so that's really a bad sign. So the consumer is really bad shape there, and then unemployment is rising there and pretty quick. Actually, this is actually when I mentioned this. So it looks like just from 5.6 to 5.7, but if actually we look at non-adjusted numbers, so actually true numbers, right, of how many people are unemployed. So if you can look, and it's from this one, the previous one was, so it's from 2.5 million people become unemployed at that time, and then now it's 2.7 in Germany. So it's almost 150,000 in very short period of time. This really looks ugly, and that's probably why the retail sales are down so much and accelerating. And I think Germany is heading for some political difficult times there if things don't change. I would say at this point, Germany probably the worst out of the all countries, that including worse than China. Let's put it this way. And there is no sort of light at the end of the tunnel. That's another problem with Germany, that it's totally heading, is going to hit the wall basically. Let's look what's going on in Asia. 6 year also ugly, and South Korea is another place where things really bad. At the same time, and well, so first of all, industrial production, as you can see, it's the downward spiral accelerating. So it's now negative 8%, which is bad, as you can imagine. The only sort of little bit redeeming situation is this export. The decline is slowing down. That's obviously not positive, but at least it's not accelerating. It's slowing down, and obviously South Korea is buying fewer imports, but the situation is. And this is actually positive that they reducing the imports faster than that they losing their export. And then manufacturing PMI is down, which is in line with this industrial production down. So overall, South Korea looks, I would say, pretty ugly, on par with Germany. Probably Germany is still worse, but this looks also pretty bad. Then let's look at Japan. Here you can see also a situation where unemployment started to rise from 2.5 to 2.7. This is again the same trend that I mentioned before. We had the very early stages of reversal in the labor or job market, whatever you call it, where there will be significant unemployment eventually. Retail sales are still good, probably because the unemployment is so low that that majority of people still don't feel sort of pain out of the unemployment. However, industrial production is, as you can see, accelerating its decline, not as terrible as in this case South Korea. And this is related to the fact that Japan is producing more value-added products relative to Korea. So, where you are on this sort of food chain is important, and Japan is higher on the food chain than South Korea. And then related to this, capital spending is the growth is declining very fast, and eventually probably will turn into negative, which is going to be very bad because this is really about the future. It's like your plant seeds for the next year. If you don't plant, you're not going to have in the future much, and decline is obviously bad. It's not only bad for, it's not so much the sort of negative. The importance of the situation is that really it also paints a very bad future. So not just it doesn't have as bad immediate effect, but it has very bad effect in the long run. That's a problem here, and this makes sense because industrial production is going down. So if you don't have demand for your manufactured goods, then you don't invest in the equipment to make that manufactured good, which is extremely logical. Okay, now let's switch a little bit to actually Russia before we jump to Ukraine, and it's very strange situation there that I would like to highlight is there were a lot of allegations against the Baltic states that they were sending UAVs to attack Russian, specifically airfield in Pskov, that I think Latvian border guards were crossing into Belarus territory. Then there is this spat between Poland and Belarus, where Poland is demanding removal of Wagner Group, and Belarus saying no, please remove your troops and all of the foreign troops from Poland. So the situation is getting really tense and going, I would say, in a negative direction. I almost want to say that it looks like Russia is looking for casus belli against the Baltic states and potentially Poland. I'm not saying this is certain, but it's just worth watching and paying attention to at this point. It's definitely not like 0% probability case. It's very low, but things are developing fast and in very negative direction there. One thing about Germany that I forgot to mention actually, which is again highlights that Germany is really gonna suffer and gonna get in really bad shape because as you can see, there's high inflation in Germany. So in most people in Germany are renters. They don't own. They own like whatever homes, apartments, whatever you call it, houses. So it's a renter society overall. You can as sort of general characterization of Germany, and rents are sort of obviously increasing. Rents are extremely painful for obvious reasons, because everybody's renting. Not everybody. I'm obviously exaggerating, but just to kind of explain what's going on there. So what the German government decided to do, they decided to implement rent controls, and I think the rent can go up only like 6% per year or something like that, which is absolutely, I would say, misguided, incompetent policy you can only imagine. It's honestly communism. Let's just call it what it is, and this guarantees that there will not be enough of those homes up for rent. eventually in the long run, in medium term. It's basically going to destroy the housing stock in Germany, which is what communism is doing always, is destroying capital. So and this just highlights, I would say, incompetence of the German government overall, and that's why they do those energy policies, economic policies, and basically they don't have positive vision for Germany. I said this about the Chinese government, and I would say the German government in the same boat. It's driving Germany into some very dark and bad place. Obviously, Germany is a very rich country, a lot of intelligent people, and so on. So that's sort of on the balancing side for all of this. But eventually, Ukraine, you will drive it into a very bad place. Like Ukraine was also very developed country 30 years ago, and with a lot of intelligent population. But if you have 30 years of terrible government, to be fair, obviously elected by the people, uh, you will end up like where Ukraine right now. And so, as I said, Germany is, I would single it out as like worst of the worst in terms of general economic situation, which is, and then the inability by the government to even understand that they're doing absolutely wrong things, and sort of arrogance in terms of continuing the failed policies, and thinking that they probably don't think, they probably realize that this is not working, but they're not willing to change. And that's just ugly reality in Germany. Now let's switch to the situation in Ukraine, and I think I want to add a little bit more about like how it works on the front line, and why, specifically, why Ukrainian offensive failed, and actually how Russian command managed to sort of stop Ukrainian forces on more on the tactical level. So how really it works. So what Russian commanders did beyond just the minefields, which is extremely important and was extremely helpful for the Russian side, what they um, and then I just want to say this: there are other components, so, right? So the aviation, then artillery, and so aviation is essentially useless. We could, even though it's being portrayed as all of this assault helicopters like Ka-52, which is great, actually. Helicopter as a helicopter is actually excellent, but it's not what really stopped Ukrainian advances, because the rockets that they have they are essentially useless. So they don't have really good the weapons. So in a way, there is a problem there where you have great helicopter, but you don't have good weapons for it, and that's just what's going on. So that whole aviation story is essentially is a false narrative. Then Russian artillery is sort of on a diet in terms of the shells they still use and all of that, but it's definitely on a diet. Plus, overall, at this point, Russian artillery is worse in terms of the distance and precision than Ukrainian. And by Ukrainian, I mean it's all Western equipment, right? So, and it says, it shoots at longer distance and more precision. So definitely, Russian artillery is not a strong factor in defenses. It is important. There's no question about it, but it's not the decisive one. What is the way it worked is really what Russian command did, and what was very actually intelligent. They embedded within this relatively low quality regular troops, which include all this mobilized people. Some of them, trained, some of them not trained very well at all. Some of them have motivation, many of them don't have motivation. But in order to strengthen they embedded the special forces brigades. And as you can see here, there's 14, but there's more. I don't have everything perfectly updated, but basically, they scattered those special forces brigades, which are relatively better quality troops, more, I would say, more better motivated, and so on, better trained, and other things. And also there are some call it like volunteer groups that are sort of very motivated on the Russian side, and obviously on Ukrainian there's many more of those. But what the Russian command did, they spread those groups along the front line and embedded within relatively low quality troops, and provided them with this anti-tank missiles on this tripod. I don't know if what's the right word for that, but I hope everybody understands what I'm talking about. And these units, they were able to basically knock out majority of the Ukrainian advancing equipment, and that's really how it worked. So, and the role of this, why so in a way these groups were like you have like meat that's raw quality, but then you put like this skeleton, which is relatively good quality, and it allows you to hold the whole defensive line so far for the Russian side. And the reason why, how it worked, and the logic here is that these groups were concentrated as on the direction of Ukrainian attacks, right? So this allowed their job would to stop the Ukrainian armor, and by that I mean all of the infantry, fighting vehicles, tanks, everything, basically anything armored. That's was their job, primary job. And then the rest, low quality troops, they would just stop the rest of the advancing Ukrainian infantry. And the more important part of the job of this low quality troops, regular troops, was to prevent the encirclement of this more better quality special forces groups that were basically just tasked with destroying Ukrainian armored vehicles. And so this worked. And the only reason it worked is because the concentration of Ukrainian forces was extremely low. They were like sort of sent like a piecemeal, basically. It's like you slowly feeding them off, and as they come, they cannot overcome this mobile anti-tank groups, because there is not enough in quantity. And this is actually another big failure and example of ineptness of Ukrainian command, because when you do offensive, you concentrate huge amount of resources in one place, in a narrow area. You're not feeding them slowly over time. You basically, it's a time and space, right? So you concentrate both in time and in space. So they were, I would say, totally not terribly not concentrated in terms of time. They were totally spread over time. So we've seen this situation playing out over essentially at this point 3 months. And then space-wise, it wasn't as bad, but still not great either. So this is sort of the outcome of this whole failed offensive. So hopefully it helps a little bit better understand why things played out the way they played out. And sort of building on what I said in the previous video, is that in this way, Russian troops can sort of dig every time new line of trenches and lay minefields, and can continue defending all the way to the Azov Sea. But obviously by that time Ukraine will run out of soldiers, and the situation in Ukraine is becoming very internally very explosive, because there are the instances where people the potential sort of conscripts getting violent against this mobilization officers is rising by day. And by that, I mean they start to beat up. I think there was even one murder of the person who worked at the mobilization office and so on. So there's the pushback is starting to grow within society against this whole mobilization effort. To be fair, it's a result of how wastefully the people were used, where they're sent essentially against the minefields to demine with their own bodies, which is insanity. And so nobody wants to do that, which is totally understandable on the individual level. So again, this is the problem Ukraine starting to face, and Russia is fully aware of that, and that's why their position is they probably don't want to even do any kind of offensive at this point. They just want to sit and let Ukraine bleed itself out to death, and they just wait. Basically, just the passage of time works for Russia at this point, and it's becoming more and more clear. And as more time passes by, the situation for Ukraine is going to get more desperate in this way. If I were to say, is it possible to change it? Yes, it is. But you need to transform Ukrainian command and political top where they become extremely efficient. There might be still sort of window of opportunity, or I would say Ukraine probably still has not crossed point of no return in terms of ability to actually defend itself, defend its independency, but it's approaching that point pretty quickly, and it's not far away at this point. Obviously nobody knows exactly where that is, but that point of no return is somewhere not terribly far away for Ukraine. So that's just unfortunately very ugly strategic picture for Ukraine that's emerging, and I think it's over time it's going to become more and more obvious and more clear. Now let's just walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, starting from very north. So the situation along the state border, it remains more or less the same, no essential changes there. Let's just jump to the North Lugansk front line. Things here are quiet, not even any tactical attacks worth mentioning by either side. Now let's jump to the North Donbass front lines. North is again also quiet, nothing is happening. South is also quiet, nothing is happening there. Let's jump to Central Donbass front line. Things here also quiet, with exception. The exception is notable tactical attacks in this Marinka area, but this is, for those who viewing all the time, this is sort of non-stop typical situation here again, but it's all tactical. There's no real, it's not any kind of offensive, just tactical fights that effectively lead to nowhere. And then let's look at Zaporizhya front line. So the only area where Ukrainian command is still trying to sort of achieve something is south of Robotyne, where Ukrainian forces trying to attack not only even towards Verbove, but it's actually they're trying to get between these two villages, Verbove and Novoprokopivka, and essentially to kind of like figure out, trying to find the path of least resistance, essentially here. And the situation here near Staromlynivka at this point on pause. And then the last section of the front line is along the Dnipro River. Ukrainian forces continue sort of resupplying and supporting the bridgeheads, attempting to set up new ones, but no attempt to actually expand from any of those existing bridgehead in a strategic way. Overall, as you can see over this whole situation, is that the front line is essentially freezing. It's definitely Russian side is not even trying to do any major, even tactical attacks. Ukrainian side is also exhausted, just continuing this one area. Um, and this is going back to what I said before: is strategically Russian side is in a position. Okay, let's just bleed Ukraine. Wide. It's war of attrition, and whatever it takes. It takes another 6 months, another year, but eventually we'll win by default by being four to five times larger than Ukraine, and that's just. And from that perspective, Russian side does not need to improve. Yes, it's sort of terrible. It's degenerated Soviet army, but it's good enough from a perspective that when you have advantage of 4 to 5 times, you can even do with low quality armies things. You can win with that. Ukraine obviously in completely opposite situation where it needs to change into quality. The Ukraine does not have quantity, and so far, Ukrainian command was acting as if this is a sort of Soviet army that can sort of throw people around and just send people into suicidal attacks and don't not care about the people. And that time is passing by and passing by quickly for Ukraine. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time.